Vishal Vivek joins us for more on the story. Vishal, what can you really tell us about what's next when it comes to Venezuela's future? Because we do know that the Venezuelan High Court has said that the Vice President is now going to take charge. Has she already been sworn in? What can you tell us?
That's really difficult to say at the moment as to what will happen, because the Constitution Court has, as you rightly mentioned, appointed the interim president. The vice president has been appointed as the interim president. But what happens now? Because Trump has said something really contradictory in nature. He said last night when we heard him at the press conference that the vice president had agreed to a shift of power. But when it came to the vice president, she said something opposite. She said that Venezuela will not bend to anyone. They are not ready to relent. So two completely conflicting statements released in the last 24 hours. That goes to show the level of confusion on the ground. What will happen now, that remains to be seen. But Venezuelan government at the moment seems to be holding its ground. The regime, the Maduro regime, might have been, toppled for some time. But the next people in his larger scheme of things, they are still there. So what US will do to them, that remains to be seen. Trump has already indicated that there could be another level of escalation. There could be one more level of strikes on the Venezuelan soil. That could also happen because Trump will not back down. He wants to, seize control of Venezuela's oil reserves, the largest in the world. So we can see another level of escalation on the Venezuelan territory. But we'll have to wait on that. There might be, some backdoor diplomacy going on. Both the sides might be engaging on some level, but we'll have to wait on confirmation for all of these.
Right, Vishal Vivek, thank you so much for joining us. Moving on, let's look at what's really next for Venezuela and what can we really expect for the future of the country after US President Donald Trump detained Nicolas Maduro yesterday. First point, it's unclear really whether Vice President Rodriguez will take control, because as my colleague Vishal Vivek also mentioned, while the High Court has said that the Vice President will take power, US President Donald Trump made contradictory statements to the government. So it's unclear yet. Next up, the Venezuelan government is continuously urging the country to remain calm, trust in the leadership and the government at the moment. This is a move in sense to control and avoid any unrest in Venezuela, any protest erupting to, in a sense, overthrow the current existing Maduro establishment that still remains in power in Venezuela, despite the fact that Nicolas Maduro was detained yesterday. Now, the Venezuelan defense minister said that all the Venezuelan armed forces have been deployed. Even the vice president said that all the armed forces, the military, is ready to defend Venezuelan resources, including oil. Now, what's really next in terms of Team Trump's plan on Venezuela? That remains quite uncertain. Yesterday, US President Trump did mention that for the time being, the US will rule on Venezuela until a transition government is, as a judicious transition takes place. However, he also did mention that US companies are now going to go into Venezuela and drill for oil. So how does that even take place, and what is the timeline for this transition? All of that remains quite uncertain. Now, as I have mentioned, US has declared the Maduro government to be illegitimate. Hence, what really means does the opposition parties take control of Venezuela? Do US officials create a team to lead Venezuela? All of that remains quite uncertain. Now, could Venezuela indeed face a regime change? That is really the biggest question in this story now, because Nicolas Maduro has reached New York. The vice president is set to take charge. However, the US government has said that that entire administration is illegitimate. So what really is next? Is regime change the next? Now, Maduro is going to stand trial on criminal charges. Remember, he faces charges of narco-terrorism. The US has indicted him. There was a 25-page indictment that was released yesterday. Now, in terms of world reactions, we of course saw that Russia, Iran, China, they've all condemned these strikes and this what they call this unilateral military action by the US on another sovereign country. However, Spain has offered to mediate tensions between the two countries. Now, another big question really is, will Nobel Peace Prize winner Machado return to Venezuela, take control? Now, there were some analysts saying that that could be next, that because she's the opposition leader of Venezuela, she could indeed become the next president. However, yesterday, US President Donald Trump did mention that the country, Venezuela, and the people of the country do not really respect Machado, trust Machado. This is exactly what US President said. So it is unclear whether the US administration will indeed hand over power to Machado, because certain analysts are also saying that when officials spoke to the Machado team, they did not have a clear plan for the future of Venezuela. So really, those are some of the big questions on the future of Venezuela.